In life, having confidence is the game changer. The belief that you can rely on someone you can trust. Someone who can provide you with compelling insights developed through rigorous analysis and based on real evidence gathered over the last 40 years. Insights to empower employers, consultants, funds, and members. To open doors to new possibilities and a better future. Confidence comes with knowledge and experience and empowers you to prepare for the ever-changing world and industry. So, wherever you want to be, partner with those who know how to get you there. Someone who is committed to equipping you with the right tools, support, and guidance to help you get from where you are to where you want to be. Welcome to Sanlam Benchmark 2021. Impactful research, compelling insights. Introducing your MC for today, Sydney Mbele.
A hearty welcome to you all to the 2021 Sanlam Benchmark. My name is Sydney Mbele, the Group Executive for Brand and Marketing at Sanlam, and I have the honored privilege of being your Master of Ceremonies for this year's edition of the Sanlam Benchmark. It is, of course, great to have you join us today, albeit virtually, as is now become the new normal, to reflect on these unpredictable times and their impact on the retirement fund industry and the lives of our members. By the way, this is very consistent with our organizational purpose of empowering generations to be financially confident, secured, and prosperous. Now, if you take the pandemic aside, it is indeed a remarkable year and occasion for the Sanlam Benchmark, as we celebrate an incredible 40th anniversary of the survey. The 40th year is often known as a year of transformation and transition, the midpoint where a young life turns into a mature one and the next phase begins. And if you bring it back to humanity, 40th birthday is a symbolic meaning. 40 is a number where we assemble our lives and think about the meaning of life. As people often say, 40 is the old age of youth. Now, if we go back to the benchmark, over the last 40 years, we've accumulated so much knowledge since the survey was first conducted way back in 1981. The insights that we've gained over the years have helped us and have helped you to keep perspective in a world that seems very different from when we first started. But it also provides a reliable guiding light to the retirement fund industry as a whole. So it's not difficult to see why the Sanlam Benchmark has become one of the most referenced and reliable surveys and publications about our industry. It is also a special year, I must say, for the Sanlam Group, with the announcement of a bold new brand promise, Live with Confidence. It highlights the opportunities that are possible from living and planning with confidence. We've begun to put this into practice with the launch of an inspirational team of confidence coaches and confidence rules. These are, of course, the first of a series of initiatives that aim to empower our clients to live with the kind of financial confidence that makes a real and lasting difference in people's lives. It is also a promise to our clients that no matter where your starting point is, we are committed to equipping you with the right tools, with the right support and guidance to help you to get from where you are to where you want to be. And the Sanlam Benchmark, of course, is just simply another proof point of how we enable this kind of confidence. Well, today we have an expert lineup of speakers for you who will unpack the findings from the Sanlam Benchmark to help you, firstly, to understand the impacts of COVID on employers, funds, and members. Secondly, to address issues related to investing and the resulting strategies that are or are not working. And of course, lastly, we want to get views of our members, their behaviors, their relationships with their employee benefits. We are also providing you with an opportunity to ask our speakers questions that are related to the content that you're going to see today. So, using the questions box that you see right next to me, you can simply type in any questions that you may have, and we will share all the answers to these questions that we receive on our website, which is www.sanlambenchmark.co.za. Right now, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome the Sanlam Corporate CEO, Khanyisa Mkhize, in her inaugural Sanlam benchmark since her appointment back in September 2020. She will share some thoughts on the Sanlam benchmark, its past, present, and what the retirement fund world would look like going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Khanyisa Mkhize.
Khanyisa Mkhize.
Thank you, Sydney. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you all today. In South Africa, as in most parts of the world, we are still feeling the tremors of the global pandemic. We are experiencing an unprecedented high level of unemployment. According to the Reserve Bank's Q1 2021 bulletin, unemployment stood at over 30% in the first quarter of this year. A fact that is understandably a worry for our industry, an industry and business that is premised on members being employed. But before I continue, I'd like to share a few quick thoughts on the Sanlam benchmark. As Sydney has mentioned, it is 40 years since we conducted our first Sanlam benchmark survey. Since 1981, the Sanlam benchmark research has provided insights and created meaningful opportunities for engagement. The benchmark has only ever had one goal, and that is to help effect a positive financial outcome in retirement for South Africans. In the process, we've established Sanlam as a thought leader in our industry. Looking back over the 40 years, there are some key events, shifts, and milestones that got us to where we are, and the Sanlam benchmark survey provides a good reflection of these. The 80s were the struggle years, a time of conflict when the laws and practices of the land curtailed the freedoms of so many. There was a time when only 75% of funds were open to all races, and eligibility was limited in so many ways, including for women. This was also the decade when Provident Retirement made its first appearance. The 90s brought political freedom and reconciliation. Members were offered greater freedom in their investment choices, and they had a greater say in the management of their funds. This came with its own risks. The 2000s brought about legislative changes to offer more protection to members. But we also witnessed greater uncertainty for members who could not meet their financial goals, in part because preservation was low. Too many members were cashing in their retirement benefits. The lack of preservation is confirmed by the fact that 71% of funds estimate that members will withdraw their full fund value in cash. The industry responded to the lack of preservation and other suboptimal outcomes by focusing on communication and education. We will hear today how advice has evolved over the years to meet the needs of our members and how it must continue to evolve to adequately meet the demands of the future. Over the 2010s, particularly since 2016, we saw the increased role that technology plays in how we operate and how we engage with members. And now, our latest report looks back at probably one of the most profound events in recent human history. It is only with wisdom, built on information gleaned from reports such as the Sanlam benchmark surveys, that we can navigate our way through these uncharted waters. Every year, we monitor the financial impact of the socio-economic conditions on the living standards of members and retirees. For this reason, our research includes a combination of qualitative and quantitative fieldwork. Over the past year, we've had over 500 structured conversations with our stakeholders. I'd like to pause here and thank our stakeholders who, year on year, sit through our interviews and allow us to brainstorm the industry challenges with them. Our research is conducted by BDRC Africa, an independent research agency. Participation in our research is confidential. This research benefits our stakeholders in different ways. With the help of a personal financial advisor, members are empowered with information that encourages them to start retirement planning much sooner. For trustees and industry players, the benefits include having a repository of information and trends specific to retirement funding. Importantly, the compelling insights from our research also enable us to adapt and evolve our offerings. You'll hear more on this a little later today, but to give a few examples, seeing the devastating financial impact COVID-19 has had on employers and members, the Sanlam Umbrella Fund Board postponed the revision of fund administration fees for a full year. This effectively meant a 0% increase in admin fees. In addition, the insured benefit revision for funds with fewer than 400 members was postponed for a period of 6 months. This allowed the insurers to price with more data and propose longer-term fees rather than short-term rates as a result of the volatile claims experienced due to COVID-19. So, we can take some comfort amidst the uncertainties presented by the world where we find ourselves in, that the Sanlam Benchmark Survey continues to help us navigate the retirement industry. Importantly, the survey helps us shape our thinking in seeking innovative and impactful ways to guide members through their journey to retirement. On this note, I want to take a moment to thank my predecessors who have, over the past 40 years, built a well-respected research engine for our industry. The employee benefits industry is unique in that our competitors are also key partners in shaping retirement outcomes for all South Africans. Their contributions to the retirement funding industry over the past 40 years is also recognized and applauded. It is my hope today, as we mark this special occasion, that we take stock of where we are, that we seek to build a retirement industry that can uplift our society and enable our members to face their retirement with financial confidence. My team and I remain deeply committed to our research initiatives, and through the Sanlam Benchmark, we will continue to invest in research aimed at contributing towards improving the retirement system in South Africa. With these words, it's back to Sydney to introduce our exciting lineup of speakers.
Thank you, Kanyisa, it's great to have you on board. It's been important to hear you reflect on the context of a situation to truly appreciate what is to follow. You've really whet our appetite for what's to come. On that note, I'd like to welcome Regit van Zyl and Lorraine Mikwa, who will provide the overview of this year's research insights. Over to you, Regit and Lorraine.
Lorraine Mikwa, Regit van Zyl.
Thank you, Sydney, and good morning, everyone. It's our pleasure to share the findings of the 2021 benchmark research with you. Over the past 40 years, the retirement fund industry has evolved alongside the social, political, economic, and technological changes in our society. It goes without saying that we expect this evolution to continue, and 10 or 40 years from now, our industry will be unrecognizable from what we know today. These broader contextual changes have impacted every facet of our members' lives and reshaped their individual needs. And now, more than ever before, these needs of our members' families have morphed together with their personal, career, and financial aspirations. As a society, we have changed. We've also witnessed mindsets change individually and as a collective. So today, we'll share with you those changing trends which relate specifically to retirement funding and what it means for members reaching their desired retirement outcomes. Our research methodology has remained mostly constant over the years. Last year, we adapted our measurement tool by changing the questions to be more fit for purpose during the pandemic. This year, we reverted to our original approach, conducting face-to-face interviews virtually via Zoom, as we do most things and engagements these days, like today. In total, we conducted 200 interviews, and once again, we received overwhelming year-on-year participation, with 68% of standalone funds and 48% of employers participating in umbrella funds from our 2019 survey also participating this year. A further 4% who participated in the standalone survey in 2019 were also interviewed as umbrella fund participants this year. This confirms the trends of conversion from standalone to umbrella funds. We also now have 8 years of data to analyze, since we first included a subset of 10 union funds in our standalone survey. These 10 funds this year represent a total of 109 billion in assets and representing over 500,000 members. Since inception, we have observed a marked increase in the average asset size, which spiked this year at just under 11 billion. The year-on-year participation rate of this union sample remains at an impressive 80%. As an industry collective, we have one goal in mind, and that is to improve members' financial outcome at retirement. We can't ignore the impact and the reality of the pandemic, and over the past year and a half, significant research has conducted to understand the impact of the pandemic on people, employees, businesses and funds, to understand how we as an industry can do better. Building on last year's benchmark, we've included some questions relating to the impact of the pandemic, and probably something we'll be tracking over the next number of years. The physical, financial, and emotional impact on employees was highlighted last year and is still very real today. This is also a recurring theme with employers and funds expressing their concern over employees' overall wellness. With this in mind, we wanted to understand how employers are solving for these more holistic needs. Most employers and funds believe that having a holistic health and financial wellness program in place is important, but apply different ways for solving for this. Half of standalone funds and only 36% of participating employees of umbrella funds believe a holistic integrated health and financial wellness program delivers higher productivity and staff happiness. This is also supported by our client experience research, where 40% of participants indicated that they find the idea of a one-stop shop solution appealing. Where others still offer these benefits, but manage some of these programs separately. A notable trend we observed was the increase in employees working from home. This flexible approach, of course, came with its own challenges, with employees having to balance work, childcare, and domestic responsibilities in one space. The transition from office to home office was also not seamless, with technology and internet access posing a substantial obstacle. This meant that employers had to rapidly think out of the box and out of their comfort zones when they need to make sure that employees remain productive over this period and remain safe. Workplace safety protocols for industries and employees where they could not work from home had also needed to be adjusted. A recent Gartner poll showed that 48% of employers will post-COVID-19 likely work remotely at least part of the time, compared to the 30% prior to the pandemic. With the increase in the amount of employees spending time online, the risk associated with cyber fraud has been amplified. Just briefly casting our minds back to 2019 benchmark, we've highlighted the risk of cyber fraud, and in response launched the Cyber Resilience Benchmark. This year, we've asked participants to share their views on whether there has been an increase in this risk with cybersecurity because of staff working remotely. The majority of funds reported an increase in such a risk. Funds and employers have been proactive in managing this risk. Most respondents say they've upgraded security software and increased security procedures. While only 13% of standalone funds and a small portion of participating employees of umbrella funds has purchased cyber insurance. Assuming that most funds and employees have some sort of insurance in place, we still expect this number to grow, since we expect the global security insurance market to grow at a compounded annual rate of approximately 22% by 2025. In response to the global crisis triggered by the pandemic, we have seen businesses closing and going into liquidation. We've also seen global mergers and acquisition activities accelerated, and companies have been reorganizing to increase efficiencies. From our benchmark research, we see that 1 in 3 funds surveyed experienced some sort of reduction in the workforce as a result of the pandemic. It seems logical that the remaining standalone funds that now have fewer members than in 2019 due to the pandemic would review their ongoing sustainability. And we anticipate many will seriously consider the option of joining the umbrella fund, perhaps this year. There seems to be strong anecdotal evidence to suggest that this is the case, and with National Treasury and the FSCA also driving industry consolidation. In addition, the operational and financial stress on businesses means that employers that have standalone funds will have to maybe want to focus on their core business activities to ensure that they are operational and operate as optimally as possible. The reduction in workforce, combined with the focus of core activities, could result in the consideration of umbrella funds for many of these employers. This, of course, had a direct impact on our members and their ability to reach retirement goals and outcomes. When we asked employers and funds what the financial impact on members was, an overwhelming 80% indicated that members had either experienced a reduction in annual increase, a reduction in current pay, or took sabbaticals without pay, highlighting the significant impact the pandemic has had on members' immediate financial needs. The industry was very quick to respond to this financial reality by offering contribution suspensions, where 27% of standalone funds and 41% of employers or participating umbrella funds indicated they have suspended retirement fund contributions during 2020 due to the financial impact of the economic lockdown. On average, this was for about 4.5 months, which is in line with the expectations indicated at last year's benchmark. There were ever 2 funds that indicated that their suspension will last for more than a year. For union funds, 70% indicated that they've suspended retirement contributions, and the suspensions also lasted for an average of 5 months. Our latest suspension statistics indicated that 8.5% of the Sanlam umbrella fund still have suspended contributions. This is a marked improvement from August in 2020, where nearly 25% of the membership was suspended in terms of contributions, indicating that there has been some economic recovery. We have previously discussed the 7 habits of financially healthy retirees. Over the years, and especially last year, a lot has changed. But saving enough through adequate contribution levels, selecting appropriate investment portfolios, considering the wider needs, and getting the right guidance and advice still remains the foundation. It's important to recognize that through this journey, members have diverse needs and preferences, and on the way to retirement, they are balancing the preparation for the future with their immediate financial needs. I'd like to hand over to Lorraine, which will take us through a bit more of the detail.
Thank you, Rigit. Saving enough through contributions is something that we've been tracking over the years. If we don't take COVID suspensions into account, since 2014, we've seen a steady increase in contribution levels. For funds and participating employers of umbrella funds, contribution levels remained fairly stable from 2019 to 2021, with an increase in employer contributions and a slight reduction in member contributions in umbrella funds. Our research has indicated that the average time that contribution rates were suspended was 4.5 months. If we consider the total standalone contributions of 17.5%, this rate drops to 10.9% due to the effect of the suspensions. While this contribution adjustment was intended to provide temporary financial relief to employees during the pandemic, some of the economic impacts might be longer lasting. Hopefully, we can see the increasing trend continue into the coming years. Regarding administration costs, the majority of funds continue to express the expenses as a percentage of a member's salary, resulting in costs at 49% for standalone funds and 75% for umbrella funds. For umbrella funds, this percentage has grown from 65% in 2019. Almost 40% of standalone funds express this cost as a fixed rand amount per member per month. In the past 2 years, we've seen a notable increase in the amount of funds using a combination of fee charging models to service their administration costs instead of charging exclusively a percentage of total asset value. As in previous years, members of very large funds benefit from the economies of scale and pay a lower administration fee of 0.5% compared to members of smaller funds who pay on average 0.7%. The average deduction for administration costs has continued to decrease for all funds over the last 5 years. benefiting retirement fund members and demonstrating that the industry is making progress in its efficiency drive. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the importance of employers offering risk benefits to their employees. The average deduction to cover the cost of life cover within the retirement funds was 1.5% for standalone funds and 1.2% for umbrella funds, which is aligned to previous years. However, considering that group risk experience is heavily impacted by the pandemic and that there's so much uncertainty around the effectiveness of the vaccine rollout, it is likely that we'll see this number increase in next year's research. A clear trend of standalone funds is that since 2015, funds have increasingly offered more flexible group risk benefits on top of core benefits, allowing members to adjust cover that suits their individual needs and financial situation. One of the key intentions of the default regulation was to improve retirement outcomes for members by considering what would be appropriate and relevant for the specific fund's membership. A lot of work has been done in the industry to minimize the risk to members. The default regulation plays a key role here by focusing on default investment strategies, default preservation, annuity strategies, and counseling on retirement benefits to improve member outcomes and behaviors. The results we have seen this year highlight a perceived lack of improvement in member behavior regarding preservation and annuitization since the implementation of default regulations. In fact, 57% of standalone funds say they have not seen an improvement in member preservation. Some of the main reasons cited include members wanting access to their cash, inadequate communication, and the deterioration in economic conditions in South Africa. However, what we have seen in practice over the past year in the Sanlam umbrella funds was that the preservation rate actually increased by 5% overall. We believe that one of the main drivers of the increasing preservation rate has been the proactive retirement benefits counseling, where we see a significant positive difference in choices members make when counseled compared to when they don't receive counseling. At 94%, it's safe to say that almost all standalone funds have trustee-endorsed strategies in place. Among umbrella sub-funds, a slightly smaller proportion, at 85%, have such strategies. It is still surprising that there's even 6% without such strategies, given that legislation requires trustee-endorsed strategies to be in place. When considering trustee-endorsed annuities, what is interesting is the shift from living annuities to providing a combination of different annuities. This is potentially one of the ways funds are aiming to address various member needs through acknowledgement that different types of annuities would cater for different member needs and preferences as it relates to flexibility, affordability, risk appetite, and longevity risks in retirement. We have seen a shift from members who potentially would have bought living annuities to rather opt for life annuities. This is likely as a result of life annuities offering better value given the pricing in 2020. Considering default investment strategies, LifeStage is still the preferred trustee choice or default for most of the funds, with half opting to offer member choice as well. For the subset of union funds, it was interesting to note that single portfolio investment at 70% was more popular than a LifeStage strategy at 30%. This is likely due to most union funds being invested in smooth bonus portfolios. Multi-manager strategies continue to dominate. It is surprising that a pure passive approach is not more popular, especially given the specific requirement in default regulations to consider passive management when constructing the default investment strategy. It is, though, quite likely that many of the multi-manager strategies include a passively managed core component. Increasingly, we're seeing alignment of the trustee-endorsed annuity strategy to the life stage investment strategy. For participating employers, this has increased from 43% in 2018 to about 60% in 2021, and standalone funds from 45% in 2015 to 70% in 2021. When the defaults first came into effect, funds viewed these defaults very separately. Now, funds are potentially reviewing these together to align a member's pre- and post-retirement journeys, which was a matter that Sanlam highlighted at a previous benchmark symposium in 2016. Over the years, our research has covered some of the broader investment themes, namely Regulation 28, transformation, and ESG. In our research that looked specifically at attitudes to infrastructure investments, we note that proposed changes to Regulation 28 have resulted in increased awareness of infrastructure as potential investments. We are all aware of the need for better infrastructure for South Africa, and it's probably something that retirement fund clients need to be considering more seriously. Back to you, Rigit.
Thanks, Lorraine. And as part of these investment themes, there were also other conversations around the boardroom table, relating to climate change, transformation, and the financial sector charter, COVID-19, Save South Africa initiatives. Altogether, while they've also seen an increase in legislation and regulation over the years. And at times, it does feel overwhelming, but it's all in the spirit of improving our industry. Some of these legislation changes came into effect this year. PPR came into effect the last 3 years, and the long-awaited T-Day came into effect the 1st of March. As an industry, we're now preparing for POPIA. Part of our research was to understand the level of awareness that exists around this legislation. Funds and employers appear to be very well aware around these requirements on their funds and providers. Drawing to the end of our presentation, what we've captured in the 2021 benchmark is the coming together of ongoing issues in our industry, along with the impact of the global pandemic on lives and livelihoods of our members. All while we as an industry prepare for some major legislative changes. We've tracked the loss of employment and the effect on our membership. We've heard again, like we did last year, around employers' concerns about the holistic well-being of employees. We observed work patterns have changed, and how many people are working from home. Employers now have to manage logistical as well as cybersecurity concerns. I think it's only in the longer term we'll witness a substantive impact these general issues will have on our industry. How will it impact our product development, our investment strategies over the next 5 to 10 years? Will there be a greater demand for financial advice and counseling? And how will this impact our provisioning of risk benefits? It's perhaps too soon to tell if the aberrations of 2020 and 2021 is mere a temporary fluctuation and will soon be put behind us, or whether it will shape how people, employers, and retirement funds prepare for the future. If nothing else, what we've experienced over the last 18 months will build on how the industry has evolved and provide us with an opportunity to reflect and to see each day as a new opportunity to do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorraine, and thank you, Rigit. Those were really compelling insights. Ladies and gentlemen, an important reminder to please submit any questions that you may have via our question box, and these will be addressed after today's benchmark on our website, www.sanlambenchmark.co.za. I'm going to repeat, www.sanlambenchmark.co.za. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are still not done with our main cause. Coming up, we will delve deeper into the impact of COVID-19 with our speakers, focusing on group risk, focusing on advice, focusing, interestingly, on the movements in the retirement fund industry. But before we get into those, Daryl will spend some time on infrastructure and investments. Daryl, please take it away.
Daryl Moodley.
Thanks Regit and Lorraine for those fantastic insights, and a good morning to you all. It's really a pleasure to address you today, albeit in a virtual setting, one that truly demonstrates the advances in technology made by human beings. When the Sanlam Benchmark Symposium began 40 years ago, live video streaming had not even entered the lexicon, so it would have been unheard of to be able to deliver a video broadcast in the manner we are doing so today. In fact, if we went back even further, the past few generations of humankind have been very fortunate to have lived through a period of sustained economic growth, pretty much since the agricultural revolution in the 18th century. This economic progress has allowed us to make unparalleled improvements in consumption, in health, education, technology, and in addressing inequality. Today we stand here in 2021, fortunate that we are on the right side of history. At the same time, there's been a rapid increase in our population, from 2 billion in the 1930s to almost 8 billion currently, coupled with an increase in GDP by 40 times over the same period. This has invariably led us to progressively push closer to the boundaries of our planet. The material footprint of our production has increased by an estimated 40 times, no doubt due to the need to meet the demands of our surging population. Agricultural land use has increased by 30%, and to provide energy for our modern lifestyles, our use of non-renewable and polluting resources such as coal, oil and gas has increased by 8 times. Our collective behavior has transformed the face of the planet as we continue to consume natural resources at a rate far higher than they are being replenished. We often refer to the megatrends of our time. These include rapid urbanization, demographic and social change, shifting economic power, technological progress, and of course climate change. These are some of the trends that continue to shape conversation globally. South Africa in particular has been slow to address these trends. But it is against this backdrop that asset managers, as custodians of capital, are increasingly drafted into debates around the evolution of capitalism, the role of capital markets, and addressing the social challenges or megatrends into the future. Kanyisa earlier referred to the 1980s as the struggle years, and that they certainly were. Under the leadership of the apartheid government at the time, South Africa moved firmly out of the ranks of the West and into the club of failing African economies. The collapse in the savings rate was alarming, as was the deteriorating infrastructure and the skewed distribution of share ownership on the JSE. It was also a time when sanctions were imposed against South Africa, and protectionist or nationalist sentiments were well entrenched in the industrial sector. The 1980s was considered to be a lost decade for most individuals, as per capita incomes in 1990 were lower than they were 10 years earlier. Does any of this ring a bell or sound vaguely familiar to our situation now in 2021? There's no doubt that we made incredible progress in many respects, especially on the human rights front, but it does feel like many of the economic gains of the past 40 years have slowly been reversed. Now, there should be no doubt in anyone's mind that the biggest crisis South Africa currently faces is the economic fallout from COVID-19. The pandemic has magnified many harsh realities in South Africa. Those of widespread poverty, high levels of inequality, rising unemployment, and rapidly aging infrastructure. Inadequate infrastructure in particular remains a major obstacle towards South Africa realizing its economic growth potential. Our government has rightly identified meeting the demand for key infrastructure as a priority and potential panacea to dealing with our wider societal and growth problems. But unlike investing in company shares or bonds, the amazing thing about infrastructure is that you are building something tangible from scratch. At its very core, It's about procuring land, sourcing materials, hiring people who would likely have been unemployed, contracting various suppliers in the value chain, professionals, architects, engineers, lawyers, and others. It really is the very essence of creating economic activity and espousing confidence when you put up new infrastructure. And once these are up and running, it makes economic activity easier by reducing frictional costs. This is one of the investment themes that generates not only good inflation-beating returns for investors, but also improves our productive capacity. What is worrying though is that South Africa will have an estimated 1.7 trillion funding shortfall over the next 15 years due to many years of underinvestment. The need for infrastructure investment and development has not gone away. In fact, it is now more apparent than ever, in sectors ranging from water, transport, waste management, energy, and agriculture. And although backlogs continue to be a concern and a political priority, a more critical issue is that of the condition of South Africa's existing infrastructure, much of which is nearing or has reached the end of their useful lives. Our energy infrastructure is just one glaring example. Apart from the recurring bouts of load shedding due to available capacity, solving the decarbonization problem will be critical for South Africa's competitiveness in the global context. And this will require substantial infrastructure investments in South Africa, both public and private, to navigate that decarbonization pathway. There's no doubt that being an emerging economy, we do expect to have more carbon headroom to grow our economy. But under the Paris Agreement, we have just under 3 decades left to decarbonize the global economy. And South Africa is currently the 12th largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, being roughly double the world average in per capita terms. Locally, we can claim to be home to Sasol's Secunda complex, which is acknowledged to be the single largest point source of greenhouse gases on the planet. Now, our renewable energy independent power producer program has raised over 200 billion in investments and has been globally hailed as a massive success. The decision recently to increase the threshold for self-generation to 100 megawatts is probably the most significant reform in the energy sector since the 1990s. This, together with another bidding window launching this year, means that there is expected to be significant capacity added to the sustainable energy mix over the coming years. This hopefully will increase the number of bankable infrastructure opportunities available to investors and provide a boost to economic growth as companies will no longer be totally reliant on Eskom. Now, this 1.7 trillion infrastructure funding gap I referred to presents a tremendous opportunity for long-term investors, such as retirement funds, to step in and fill the void. Retirement funds are long-term investment vehicles with long-term liabilities, which means that infrastructure assets could provide them with the perfect long-term hedge, as well as offer attractive risk-adjusted returns, if managed well. They also increase diversification within portfolios due to low correlation with other asset classes. And importantly, they can have a multiplier effect on the economy. It's precisely for these reasons that Sanlam welcomes the proposed changes to Regulation 28, as they highlight infrastructure as a viable asset class for retirement funds. But from the perspective of an asset manager, it's important to recognize that they are not the owners of the assets being managed. Asset managers are merely stewards. Retirement funds and the underlying members actually own the assets. Asset managers simply execute on their needs and their strategies. They inform clients on ideas, and clients give them permission to do things on their behalf. Now, while the asset management industry believes that infrastructure investments can be leveraged to catalyze economic growth in South Africa, this does appear to be a sentiment shared by the respondents in our 2021 benchmark survey. For example, standalone retirement funds indicated that they will invest on average 6.6% of their fund assets into infrastructure, with participating employees of umbrella funds indicating an allocation of around 4.7%. The obvious question is, will this be enough? And when we reflect back in a few years' time, will we find that the industry was on the right side of history with this level of investment. Now, this may appear to be a fairly small allocation to some, but considering that retirement funds consist of around 4.5 trillion rands in assets, this could translate to almost 300 billion in direct infrastructure investments. This is fairly substantial, but unfortunately still well short of plugging that 1.7 trillion funding gap. We must acknowledge, though, that the infrastructure investment opportunity does come with several complexities. The asset class is unlisted and fairly illiquid, and the large quantum and long-term nature of contracts, with the government often a central role player, make these investments complex to structure and with limited flexibility post-investment. And let's not forget that government-linked projects in South Africa have often been fertile breeding grounds for budding entrepreneurs. This means that investment in infrastructure does require extreme levels of skill, due diligence, and governance, but can have significant long-term rewards for investors. What is worrying, however, is that the unit trust and ETF sectors of the market offer the illusion of immediate liquidity when we invest in essentially long-duration, often illiquid assets. I think we have the duty to impress on members that when saving for retirement over their 40-year working journey, you're not saving for tomorrow. You're saving for the long term, 20, 30, 40 years into the future. And if you want to treat your investments like an ATM with immediate liquidity, then a bank account or even a box under your mattress may be more appropriate. But within a retirement fund, one really needs to allow your portfolio to work over the long run. And this really is the appeal of infrastructure given its similar long-term characteristics. Looking forward, how do we engage deeper rather than dogmatically comparing investment performance of portfolios, their peers, fees, total expense ratios every quarter? In the past, as long as you chose a top-performing, well-known fund, you were able to generate reasonable financial outcomes. But I think that this is perhaps more nuanced in today's complex world. One also needs to be purposeful. In terms of retirement outcomes, it's well documented that less than 10% of South Africans retire comfortably. Now, this in itself is a shocking outcome from one of the largest retirement fund systems in the world. But it still considers just financial outcomes, usually relative to some arbitrary replacement ratio statistic. But how do we measure more holistic retirement outcomes? We know that having an adequate pot of assets at the end of the rainbow can provide financial peace of mind, but one also wants a dignified retirement in a viable environment. What's the point of saving diligently for 40 years if you are going to retire in a place that is devoid of essential infrastructure? And if the right steps are not taken soon, this could potentially be the next pandemic waiting for us in the next 40 years. So this is no longer simply a discussion of investment returns versus people or society or the environment. There's now a greater richness to these discussions. And in reality, investment performance and purpose can be two sides of the same coin. It's more a case of one hand washing the other, as you can earn good returns by doing all the good things: infrastructure development, supporting the communities, and decarbonization. I think that everyone has a role to play in trying to address the deep misalignment in the global economy, in the South African economy. And it's during times of crisis that people truly become aligned in their thinking. So as we end off and continue the celebration of 40 years of research, I want to ask you all, what will the next 40 years of research tell us? What will we look back on as being the watershed moments in enabling our economy to flourish? And how do you ensure that your investments, those of your clients and those of your kids, are on the right side of history?
Michelle Jennings.
Thank you, Daryl. Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, and colleagues. Once again, from me, thank you for joining us. As the head of an insurance product house, I wish I could stand here in front of you with amazing insights, projections, and solutions about COVID-19. But instead, I stand here as one of you. Life insurers, like everybody else, have had a challenging year with COVID-19. We have been through the almost overnight restructuring of the business model to work from home, economic uncertainty, extremely high claim levels, and just as importantly, the critical actions required to care for and protect our own employees. COVID-19 has impacted everyone. In Sanlam, almost 1,200 of our colleagues have tested positive, 20 of whom succumbed to the virus, along with many more family members and friends. So when we look at the statistics that I'm about to share with you, know that I am standing here as a human being who, just like you, has been deeply affected by this crisis. My goal today is to highlight that with these pressures, our industry has had no alternative other than to evolve to survive. Because, and I admit it freely, like many other businesses, Sanlam Group Risk has struggled with profitability and service delivery during the pandemic. I'm sure that by now most of you are familiar with the South African Medical Research Council's weekly mortality statistics, which compare actual deaths with the projected mortality numbers. In the graph that you see on your screens, we have the national and Sanlam Group Risk experience in one graph, and the expected deaths reflected in the yellow line. The national graph, reflected by the dark blue line with the axis on the left, reflects the total South African deaths. The pale blue line with the axis on the right reflects the Sanlam Group Risk total deaths by date of death, adjusted for claims incurred but not reported for the same period. In this graph, it is evident that Sanlam's mortality experience has mirrored that of South Africa, except for the second wave, where the insured population mortality was higher than that of the national trend. According to ASISA, this is also consistent across all the major insurers and is 400% greater than the expected mortality. Between March 2020 and the first week of February 2021, South Africa recorded more than 137,000 excess deaths due to natural causes, which is substantially higher than the 44,500 confirmed COVID-19 deaths reported by the Minister of Health. Based on research, the South African Medical Research Council estimates that 85 to 95% of the excess natural deaths are attributable to COVID-19, with the remaining excess deaths deemed to be attributable to collateral causes, probably due to overwhelming the health services during surges in the pandemic. I believe that the true purpose of an insurer is to deliver on the promise made to clients, to support them in their time of need. COVID-19 is a global crisis, and I am sure that the intermediaries, brokers, and consultants watching this event will all agree that our clients have really needed us during this crisis. But what did they need? How well did insurers do in meeting these needs? And are insurers ready for the next wave or crisis? Guidewire commissioned research during COVID-19 to examine client perspectives on insurers, with the objective to gain insight into how insurers can improve client relationships and enhance their products and services. This aligned very closely with Sanlam Corporate's own internal findings on what our clients say they need. With regards to service, the top qualities UK clients required were to pay claims quickly at 40%, to keep data safe, have the option to speak to a human, followed by low premiums, clear terminology, and the ability to communicate online. The UK survey also highlighted that clients value other important non-service related factors, including innovating around products and processes while maintaining the highest levels of operational efficiency and availability. I don't think that these findings would surprise anybody watching. With regards to the top service requirement for insurers to pay claims quickly, clearly, South African insurers stepped up and paid claims. Old Mutual reported that they paid 1.9 billion in death claims in January and February of 2021. And MMI reported that they paid 3.8 billion and Sanlam Life 3.8 billion for Q1 of 2021. This graph reflects the Sanlam Group Risk value of claims by date of death, by month and year. You can see the COVID-19 peaks in the purple bars in July, August and December of 2020. They are in the region of 30 to 50% higher than the expected values for those periods. And then you see the yellow bar of January 2021 at about 300% of the expected values. Had we looked at this graph reflecting the total number of claims paid in this period, the January 2021 yellow bar would reflect 250% of historical volumes. Many of the insurers have published their own experiences similar to this, reflecting a drastic increase in both the volumes and values of claims during the COVID-19 peaks. The increase in values has been attributed to the increase in claims for members 45 years and older, who are usually the higher income earners. In discussions that I've had with our peers, it is clear that the pandemic has resulted in all insurers processing unprecedented volumes, and as a result, we have all experienced operational challenges. So as insurers, we certainly did pay claims, but we all acknowledge that we didn't always pay them quickly. Therefore, given the start of the third wave and the threat of a possible fourth COVID wave, there are a few actions that we as an industry can and need to take. From an insurer perspective, our goal is sustainability for the long haul and not just for 1 or 2 years through COVID-19. Sanlam is once again in the fortunate position of being an insurer with one of the highest levels of capital and reserves. So you can rest assured that with a group solvency requirement ratio of 242%, Sanlam Life will have sufficient reserves and capital to pay claims through these next COVID-19 waves or the next crisis. But to pay claims quickly, group insurers also need to make operational changes, and these will require a combination of adding resources and investing in digital. And although most insurers are on this journey already, we are at varying stages and quality of doing so. I also asked our claims team for the top few items they felt would reduce claim payment delays, and I'm sure that these apply to other insurers too. Their responses included in the checklist on the right. However, there is one item that I would specifically like to highlight today. And please, never before has this been more important. As a result of the new Insurance Act of 2017, employers, insurers, and intermediaries can no longer, under any circumstances, apply their discretion in determining the correct beneficiaries for unapproved business. And yes, that includes funeral business. In the absence of a beneficiary nomination form for unapproved business, even a funeral benefit will be paid to the estate. Numerous articles have been published about corruption at the Master's offices, with the recent report in the Business Day headlined, "Legal Fraternity Up in Arms Over Chaotic Backlog at Master's Offices." None of us want our clients to go through that. So if there is one thing that you take out of this presentation today, it is to please drive the updating of your own, your clients, and your staff members' beneficiary nomination forms. I have provided my perspective on insurers' delivery during the COVID-19 crisis, and I thought it important to get an independent view. So I reflected on the recent report of the Ombudsman for Long-Term Insurance. This report, released late in May, highlights poor service, communication, and claims declined as the main reasons for the complaints that reached their offices. They noted that service-related complaints most likely increased due to remote working conditions, resulting in difficulty in contacting and communicating with insurers. This led to complaints, particularly when claimants were desperate to have claims paid, for example under funeral policies. Understandably, some of the service complaints were attributable to the large volumes of claims and queries submitted to insurers during the pandemic. The Ombudsman's report also noted that insurer relief packages were not all equally generous, resulting in cover being reduced or lapsed, which is terribly unfortunate during a pandemic when cover is so crucial. I am once again proud to report that the Sanlam Life complaints that reached the Ombudsman were proportionately very low, and the number of cases resolved wholly or partially in favour of the complainant was the lowest of all the insurers. Clients have keep my data safe as a very important service consideration, which is something that we too believe is critically important, especially now with so much being done online, and with the Protection of Personal Information Act deadline looming, it is more important than ever. Our benchmark research shows that the awareness of the impact of POPIA on service providers is 80 to 90% there. Although from some of the interactions that I have had so far, I'm not totally convinced that employers or funds fully understand their own roles as responsible parties under POPIA. But what I really found interesting in the benchmark research is that 56% of the respondents felt that they would rely on their consultants to monitor the service provider's compliance with POPIA. Perhaps they feel that the consultants are a little bored now because the policyholder protection rules and T-Day have passed. Clients also highlighted their need for human service consultants, as well as online engagement platforms. I suspect this is because members want access to online platforms for self-service capabilities, but when they need technical, non-standard or escalated support, they want to talk to a human being. Looking purely at digital developments in Sanlam Group Risk, many of you will already be aware of Sanlam Corporate's best-in-industry retirement fund administration digital capabilities. Well, based on your feedback, we are starting to introduce some of these initiatives into our business too. These new digital touchpoints aim to speed up service delivery, such as the online portal for submitting death claims and a fully digital PPR-compliant member benefit statement. Only 13% of benchmark respondents said that they rely on the insurer to deliver on PPR Rule 11, which requires the insurer to keep members informed of their insurance benefits. So, to the clients who plan to rely on their own communication departments or their own retirement fund administrators to perform this function, please ensure that you or your retirement fund administrator is fully compliant with the PPR rules regarding member communication. We are performing due diligences on the large retirement fund administrators, but please feel free to chat to us if you would like to ensure that you or your service provider is complying with the PPR requirements, and we'll be happy to assist you. Personal engagement is something that we have focused on in Sanlam Corporate. The new digital solutions are never at the expense of a human touch when it is needed. For example, we offer client solutions specialists, call center agents, client relationship managers, senior managers, and even our executives are available to assist you when needed. Reality Access for SGR, which is an integrated offering and not a separate paid-for loyalty benefit, is a perfect example of where we strive for balance between human connection and digital interactions. We found that the members who gave us permission to include them in the Reality Access service offering made extensive use of the personal benefits offered during the COVID pandemic. Obviously, burial repatriation usage was higher than normal, but we also saw an increase in legal aid, and we were pleased to see that the ShopRite and Dis-Chem vouchers were in very high demand. Our benchmark research shows that the remuneration of 2/3 of our members was negatively impacted during COVID-19 and the lockdown. So it is not surprising that our client experience research identified that members want more relevant, value-added services and holistic integrated offerings. This, together with COVID-19 realities, really requires insurers to step up their product and process innovation. Within Sanlam Corporate, we are pleased to have added Ivy Online to our menu of Reality Access value-added services. This will provide much-needed education and tutor support to children who are struggling in this new pandemic environment. Furthermore, we are also piloting virtual nurse and doctor consultations among some of our umbrella fund clients. Virtual healthcare has surged during the pandemic, particularly benefiting the low-income employees, with 40% of them more likely to say that they received the care that they needed when using virtual care. So rolling this out to our extremely broad base of clients would enable access to nurses, doctors and scripts at minimal cost and without long queues or traveling times, which will really add significant value in our clients' lives. We also made some changes that were extremely meaningful to a few people, where rather than using existing policy conditions as a means to repudiate claims, we waived some conditions and policies to enable claims to be paid. For example, as a result of COVID, we sadly saw entire families dying within a couple of days of each other. So we changed our policy to cover spouses and children for the full month that the premiums were paid. Although it was fourth on the list of priorities in the Guidewire research, the requirement for lower pricing is obviously a big concern for insurers at this stage. On the one hand, members are under extreme financial pressure, and on the other hand, it is not sustainable for insurers to continue to carry the extensive burden of claims that far exceed the value of premiums that they have received. You can see this recent experience reflected by the yellow claims line on this graph, where it runs above the blue premium line. Group risk insurance is annually renewable, and market forces and competitors ensure that insurers do not generate excessive profits. And shareholders, regulators, and auditors ensure that premiums are adequate for the future sustainability of the insurer. In other words, the net premium and claims lines on this graph are driven by market forces to be very close to each other. In the past, about 5 years of experience and trends were used to project the next 12 months of experience. However, under the current circumstances with COVID-19, the past 12 months are the closest proxy that we have for projecting the next 12 months. All insurers are struggling with these projections. Different industries have shown unexpected claims experience, and our pricing basis has had to be adjusted regularly to accommodate this. However, the good news is that as time progresses and we get through the waves and closer to the real deployment of the vaccine, projected claims will decrease, and our models and basis will be updated. Therefore, once experience improves, mortality rates will also decrease again. We also remain hopeful of improved economic recovery, as current projections do not bode well for the future of PHI and its pricing. A lot of our time is spent doing research, analysis, and building models to try to project the future impact of COVID-19 and the economy on mortality and morbidity. At this stage, a lot of the information is conflicting, so we continue to monitor it closely. Confidence rule number 27 has never been more important than when it comes to selecting an insurer. Rule 27 says, having the right support can get you through the unthinkable. Well, COVID-19 has, for many, been the unthinkable. And as an insurer, we are proud that we've been able to provide support to so many during this crisis. We thank our clients and stakeholders for being so patient and understanding with us during this pandemic. Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Barend.
Barend Legranji.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So far this morning, we've been presented with interesting ideas and riveting insights into our industry, as we've come to expect from the Sanlam benchmark. But I want to shift gears a bit, take a step back from all of the detail and try to bring our focus back to the people we're doing this all for, the individuals at the heart of our business and what we do, our members. My name is Barend Legranji and I head up the individual member support business within Sanlam Corporate. We provide retirement benefit counselling services to funds to inform members of the options that fund has made available for them to help them achieve positive retirement outcomes. The business unit actually has its origins in the lead up to the implementation of the default regulations on 1 March 2019. And it wasn't more than 3 months later that our then CEO announced here at the Sanlam benchmark that Sanlam Corporate would be providing retirement benefit counselling services for free. In our world of risk and uncertainty, the Sanlam benchmark survey has consistently been a trusted guide, helping us to navigate the retirement industry and provide the practical advice needed to empower members to retire with confidence. It's our task and obligation as financial professionals to serve as trusted guides and even partners, if you will, and the right partners at that, through all the changes and challenges that members may experience during their working lives. But if it's their good that we serve, how do we know and measure whether we've provided the best service and advice? Today, I want to invite you to scan the horizon with me as we unpack how advice is perceived in our industry, what trends we're seeing in the advice space, and highlight some of the considerations and practical steps all of us can take to improve financial outcomes for the members we serve. Our benchmark research showed that the main communication channel for 86% of standalone funds is email. The second main communication channel, at 75%, is through newsletters. How many people watching this event read the latest Sunday newspapers? These styles of engagement are simply not as widely adopted as they used to be. The presenters today have highlighted the astonishing impact COVID-19 has had on society and the financial industry in particular. One of these is the acceleration in the adoption of digital tools as a means of communication and automation. This opens up new possibilities that hadn't been explored before. But if we are to provide the best advice and ensure that our members are aware of and heed that advice, these are avenues that we must explore. The ways in which the provision of advice will be affected by an ever-increasing digitized world is not limited to engagement. Parts of the traditional advice service will be moved online to unlock efficiencies. A related issue that will need to be addressed is the industry's ability to creatively cater for the many members without online access. Parts of the advice process will be enabled through self-service, especially those parts of the service that's predominantly paperwork, as people get used to engaging digitally. Finally, Technology will enable advisors to provide a wider range of services and enhance their existing services to provide even deeper insights. Circling back to my question at the start of the presentation, how do we know if the advice provided was good advice? We can't go back to every single member to track how well the advice that was given actually suited them. But many funds have not reviewed their default strategies. For a fund to review their strategy, they have to monitor whether members are actually using the annuity specified in their strategy. But 20% of umbrella funds don't monitor outcomes, which makes reviewing the strategy impossible. On top of that, of those funds that actually do monitor outcomes, more than 20% only plan on reviewing their strategies every 3 years or longer, or don't plan on ever doing so. And remember, reviewing your annuity strategy annually is required as part of the default regulations. If you never review your strategy as a fund, how do you deliver value to members and respond to their evolving needs? When it comes to investment performance, are those who advise on investment strategies getting the results they seek? An interesting finding from our research showed that when it comes to benchmarks used by standalone funds, there's a four-way split between peer group, indices, CPI-related, and a combination of benchmarks. So, it's fair to expect that a little bit of consideration is given to how performance is measured. Additionally, is the advice on investment vehicles sufficient, considering pressing societal needs such as broad-based black economic empowerment and ESG? Or are funds cognitively deferring all investment-related risks to the asset consultants? Every stakeholder here today takes advice and gives advice. I want to argue that much of the attention has been given to the latter. Advice received does not get interrogated and scrutinized as much as it should be. We are all used to asking, as an advisor, what's the value that I add? But I want to flip that around and ask, as a stakeholder, what value are those that I'm appointed to serve getting from the advice that I receive? As someone giving advice, I need to ensure that my value proposition has been adequately articulated, communicated to those I advise. Going forward, we must ensure that those advisors who are focused on what matters and are proactive enough to give feedback on the adequacy of their advice, as opposed to merely paying lip service or avoiding feedback altogether, are going to come out in front. It's worth mentioning that things can go wrong, even when good advice had been given. But be it during uncertainty or amidst a global pandemic, advisors must still give objective results for interrogation and justify and explain decision-making processes when things do go wrong. It's imperative that we as an industry do more and do better. If we can agree that the ultimate beneficiary of our efforts is the member, we can sharpen our focus. We can do a better job of advising on the member's needs from our place along the retirement funding industry's value chain. We also need to recognize that individuals have holistic financial needs that go beyond retirement and our industry. But that does not mean we have no role to play in these other spheres of their financial lives. Funds can take specific steps to better serve their members' overall financial well-being. For the remainder of this presentation, let's shift our attention to focus solely on how we can play a role on delivering on members' holistic financial needs. Our research indicates that 54% of standalone funds have a formalized advice strategy for active members, while this number is 70% for umbrella funds. Now, this is a great step in the right direction, but it does mean that 46% of standalone funds do not have a formalized advice strategy, with the alternative being to leave members to speak to their own financial advisor. We're likely excluding some of those members from the advice they may need. And more than likely, these are going to be the lower income members who don't have their own advisor. Where funds do have an advice strategy, fees can even be negotiated by the fund and subsidized by the fund itself, as is the case in 48% of our research sample. The main objection to not having an advice strategy is the additional responsibility or liability it must place on the fund, which is understandable. But with close to 20% of funds saying that they don't know where to find providers, it doesn't add sufficient value, or that the fund has other priorities, I'm questioning whether the well-being of the member is being prioritized here. As funds, have we considered all the ways in which different types of advice can help members? Of the funds that do provide advice, around a half to two-thirds do so when a member joins a fund or when they withdraw. 25 to 35% of funds do so for investment switches or at critical life events. So, even for funds that do provide advice, there's still a lot of opportunity to better address members' needs. In 2014, we spoke about the 7 habits of financial healthy retirees, where we pointed out that the lack of preservation is one of the main leading factors to suboptimal retirement outcomes for members. This is also one of the points that the regulator aims to address through the default regulations. So let's unpack it a little bit, focusing specifically on retirement. Sanlam Corporate's internal data indicates that retirement benefit counselling is having a positive impact, as can be seen in the lower proportion of members taking cash when counselled compared to not being counselled. Moreover, 62% of funds indicate that they are reaching up to 90% to 100% of their members. Now, looking at this in isolation, member communication and positive engagement outcomes does not seem to be a problem at all, but we know that's not the case, so let's dive a little deeper. 46% of funds indicate that they do not believe member outcomes have improved. Why? Well, the main reason can be broadly grouped into 2 categories. Firstly, members are simply financially strained. And secondly, ineffective member communication and engagement. Which brings us back to the method of communicating and delivering counselling. Only 43% of funds leverage off technological solutions to provide counselling. And only 47% have retirement benefit counsellors who actually contact members proactively. What we've seen in practice during 2021 is that, excluding online engagement, the majority of members still prefer to engage telephonically. This shifts when engaging proactively, with a large part of the engagement shifting to other engagement channels, as you can see. In addition, proactive counselling is up to 4 to 5 times more effective than reactive strategies. I do actually suspect that face-to-face engagement might be members' first choice, but that's probably not a cost-viable model when it comes to retirement benefit counselling. Many of you would have seen our personalized interactive video, where the video is dynamically tailored to a fund-specific annuity strategy. Or our online member portal, where members can play around with estimated income they can expect at retirement, amongst many other features. A recent addition we've implemented is video calling. Not only providing counselling to members over video, but allowing the member to directly schedule a meeting into the diary of a retirement benefit counsellor, allowing the member to receive counselling at a time that suits them. So, let's have a look at how this technological solution works in practice. Mr. John Doe wants to have a retirement benefit counselling session via MS Teams. A couple of months prior to retirement, he receives the following email. He clicks on book a meeting and it takes him to this page over here. Here, he can select a suitable date and time for himself and the counsellor, and might even write a short message detailing some of the information he's looking for. He clicks on book. This meeting gets scheduled directly into one of our counsellor's diaries. And he receives an invite with a link to MS Teams. These are some examples of where we think engagement needs to be heading into the future, especially if we want to get to more members and empower them to make better decisions. So, will digital take over every single engagement immediately? Well, most certainly not, but it will undoubtedly play an increasingly important role in us getting to more members, doing so more efficiently and meeting more of their needs. Engagement is one part of this holistic solution, with the other being the actual solutions that gets put forward. In considering holistic member outcomes, there are many opportunities and multiple parties that could potentially fill this gap. I think the one thing we can be sure of is that this gap will not be filled by one party, but rather through partnerships that enables us to leverage off each other's strengths. I've recently heard someone say that providing financial advice is becoming more difficult, as there are fewer legislative and governance requirements. And while yes, less actuarial valuation work has to be conducted to ensure funds are adequately funded. I, however, want to argue that opportunities still abound if we are going to take the members' holistic financial needs as our guiding principle. That's because, while regulation just puts up the guardrails helping those who don't have the right focus, the legislative and governance requirements were not simply established as checkboxes. It's always been about doing what's right to ensure that the member achieve the best possible financial outcome. The retirement funding industry is arguably one of the best vehicles available to provide solutions to the majority of people in South Africa, given our large link to a large proportion of the population. Moreover, if used effectively, we have the ability to put cost-effective advice and member-focused solutions in place. Solutions that can be made available to all members to empower them with the financial confidence to plan now and ensure that they work towards a more prosperous future. The advice landscape has shifted dramatically in recent years, and it will continue to shift. It's our duty to keep abreast of these shifts and to look ahead for further changes that might impact our industry, so that we can best serve our members and instill confidence not just in the financial futures, but that in us they have found the best partners. Up next, I'd like to welcome Avishal, who will be unpacking the movements in the retirement funding industry. Thank you.
Avishal Seeth.
Good morning to all our attendees. It is, once again, a pleasure to address you, and for the second time in a virtual setting at the Sanlam benchmark. I still haven't gotten used to imagining that there's a live audience in the room with me to work off your energy, but perhaps this is something that will be possible in the next 40 years. This morning, you've heard about the trends that we've observed as a result of the 40 years of benchmark research. You've also listened to various speakers projecting the future based on these trends, and what we view the world of work and humans in general to require into the future. Previously, I've had the pleasure of speaking to you from an advisory perspective, and this allowed me to focus exclusively on my experiences as an advisor and my own views and perspectives as a result of interaction with clients. This then gave me the license to tell service providers what we as advisors, employers, and members required. Fast forward a year, in my new role as head of Sanlam Umbrella Solutions, I need to put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and demonstrate that I have the ability to listen to my past self. So, today, while I will cover some of the major movements in the industry to give you context as to where we are now, I'll also talk about how my short experience on the dark side or product side has invigorated me in continuing to champion the needs of the member. So let's get into my session today with a short recap of what I think are the big industry events over the past 40 years. We start in 1981, with the major event of the year being the royal wedding. This wedding had a global viewership of nearly 1 billion people, which at the time was unheard of. At this time, defined benefit funds ruled the roost. The employer took on all the investment risk, and members were able to secure good outcomes because of simply remaining at the same employer for their working lives, which was quite a common occurrence in those days. If we move to 1985, which is an important date for all of us, given that I arrived in this year, we see that one of the iconic concerts of all time took place this year, Live Aid. Around this period, the start of the move from defined benefit to defined contribution happened, and this continued into the 90s. The first push for this move was from trade unions, who wanted simpler, more transparent withdrawal benefits and access to lump sums at retirement. The second push was driven by employers who wanted a reduction of volatility on their balance sheets and to remove the effect of this movement on their income statement. Many also just wanted to appease the demands of the unions, and this was a fight that they didn't feel too strongly about. Which brings me to my next point regarding the change in the paternalistic nature of the employer. What employers and indeed the industry as a whole, being advisors and product providers, clearly missed at this point was the obvious transfer of investment risk from the employer to the member, and what should have been a significant education and information exercise around this specific point. Also, that members needed to start taking responsibility for their retirement savings. What we have presented on previously is that we view this as the start of poorer outcomes in retirement for members. In fact, one of the eminent journalists on retirement, Bruce Cameron, has pointed this out again as recently as last month, which I think is an indictment on the industry, in that for 30 years, we haven't helped our members help themselves. The move to defined contribution continued well into the 90s, and another step change occurred in 1998 that to this day remains key for many stakeholders, and that was the requirement for member representation on boards of trustees. Something that arose out of this was that it became clear that many boards were not adequately trained to recognize the huge responsibility that they were taking on as a trustee of a retirement fund. Furthermore, they simply weren't adequately trained to be able to make competent and informed decisions regarding the life savings of members of these retirement funds. For this reason, advisors and consultants began to rule the roost. There was a heavy reliance on the advice from consultants, which in many cases continues to this day. But most boards have learned to question the advice that they receive with the necessary amount of skepticism. This further adds to the role of the board in looking after the needs of the member. Post-2000, there's been a plethora of step changes and mega events that have molded the industry into what it is now. It started in 2001 with the surplus legislation, and this was a further push to the DC environment for many employers. The wide-ranging bulking scandal of the mid-2000s will forever be a scar in the industry that is still remembered quite sorely by many trustees. I can confirm that the industry also remembers this quite vividly, and the resultant increase in controls and governance measures have benefited the industry and members alike. The next big move was the move from standalone or private funds to umbrella funds. If we have a look at this graph, it's clear to see that the level of consolidation is nothing short of phenomenal. Stats from the FSCA last year indicated around 1,500 active registered funds, well down from the over 16,000 in the early 90s. The regulator has made their thoughts on this matter quite clear. In 2018, Olano Makabela announced that there should be less than 200 active funds in total in South Africa. Just a few weeks ago at the Pension Lawyers Association conference, Ishmael Mumaniat from National Treasury stated that consolidation must continue. Let's hear his exact words so that you don't have to take my word for it.
But it's consolidation? We've got too many funds. Our system is inefficient. It's uneconomical. It's not in the interest of members. And charges are high because we have so many funds. So, I think we need to accelerate the push towards consolidation. And I don't know what the ultimate figure is. Perhaps it's 10 funds. Perhaps it's 50. Perhaps it's 100. Perhaps it's 200. We can pick a number, but it certainly can't be a few thousand. Yes, most of them are not very active funds. Most of them are small funds.
Now, the cause for this mass move to umbrella funds has been due to many different reasons. In most cases, multiple reasons applied, such as increased costs, onerous governance requirements, trustee personal liability, employers focusing on their core business rather than having employees looking at peripheral matters related to retirement funds, lack of expertise within employers to ably manage the retirement fund. And that brings us to the present, 40 years later, and what have we actually managed to achieve? Put yourself in the shoes of someone that retired in 2020. Can you imagine the stress and anxiety that this person would have experienced? How easy would have access to information have been for this retiree? Would the retiree have received any information telling them not to withdraw their funds as at the end of April 2020 as far as possible, and rather wait a few months for the market to recover? Did we make the effort to help this retiree make informed decisions? When you think about our most recent retirees, do you think that we as an industry have done enough? Do you feel that maybe the great structures and governance that we've put in place haven't been enough to help members help themselves and reach good retirement outcomes? It's this question that is the perfect point on which we can move into what we can expect into the future. I thought that a good way to move into the future view is to ask ourselves what our retirees of the next 25 to 40 years look like. If we had to broadly classify them, we could use generational terms and call them millennials and Gen Z. What do we know about them? Well, millennials are the largest proportion of the working population, by a long way. The oldest millennials are turning 40 this year. These 40-year-olds are being referred to as geriatric millennials by Gen Z. And if you consider the recent media coverage related to millennials, you are led to believe that they are the largest generational portion of the working population that controls the least amount of wealth, and that they are the most educated generation, but now without employment or any real savings. You'd be led to believe that all of the odds are stacked against us as millennials, and never mind considerations for retirement savings. We're struggling to even generate income for living expenses. In the South African context, this may be even more true, with levels of youth unemployment at the highest levels in history. Statistics South Africa tells us that youth unemployment is currently at over 60%. Without a job, how are the future retirees even going to contemplate retirement? We've spoken about the concept of retirement being outdated, and many retirees continuing to work well past their retirement age. But for the youth of today, or rather our future retirees, that isn't even an option. Retirement as a concept is outdated for them because you can't retire if you aren't even working. Still, the sentiment expressed by industry and media is that millennials don't worry about the future and couldn't care less about retirement. As a millennial, I don't think that the issue is as much that we don't take retirement planning seriously, rather than that there are a multitude of other issues that require our immediate engagement, that would force thinking about retirement lower on our list of priorities. Many young people are burdened with supporting not only themselves and their own families, but also their parents, grandparents, and even siblings. The formula is quite simple. The lower the proportion of the population employed, the more people that are reliant on those that are employed, and in turn, the greater the burden on the employed. As important as planning for your retirement from a young age is, the immediate need of supporting those closest to you now ranks high on the list. Some of the retirees that we interviewed actually provided feedback that I think garners some food for thought. I know I did not save as much as I can for retirement, but I sent each of my kids to university. One of them said, I bought each of my kids a home so that they can start out their lives without the hassle of getting into debt. And possibly my favorite quote, my family is my most important and valuable asset. Could this then be considered an alternative strategy, perhaps? There are many of us here that are currently supporting parents or siblings. Do you think that you could count on your children to look after you financially in retirement? We have a lot of information on our future retirees. We know what is stressing them and what results in them not saving for retirement. Many future retirees are in large amounts of debt that they are struggling to service, resulting in severe stress, and this then leads to health issues. The 2021 PwC Financial Wellness Survey revealed some important information for us. As a result of the pandemic, more than 70% of millennials experienced increased financial stress, with that number reducing slightly for other generations. Overall, we can see that everyone has experienced increased financial stress. There's clearly a struggle for employees to meet monthly household expenses, even for those that have managed to maintain their level of income over the past year. 87% of employees surveyed say that they want help when it comes to their personal finances. The Willis Towers Watson Global Benefit Attitude Survey indicates the effect on employees' mental health over the past year. No surprise, there's been a deterioration. In addition, 2 out of 5 employees are looking for more flexible hybrid work-from-home arrangements. Research definitely indicates that this could improve levels of productivity. Steve Nice, a senior economist at Willis Towers Watson, puts it quite nicely in this quote. The opportunity for employers to play a critical role in helping employees improve their financial well-being and retirement readiness remains great. Investing in tools and resources and educating and encouraging employees to use them can go a long way towards reducing employee financial stress and boosting healthy outcomes and worker productivity. Now, I would actually change the word employers in the above quote to product providers. We have the ability and also the opportunity to perform this role as well as, if not better than, employers. Earlier, we've shown you the actual improvement in member outcomes as a result of our free proactive benefit counseling service. And we're also implementing non-financial and healthcare solutions as part of our holistic value proposition. The benchmark research this year, as indicated by Lorraine earlier, clearly showed that the majority of funds believe in the benefits of having a holistic, integrated health and financial wellness program. If we were to act in the way that the data tells us we should, I'm confident that we'll be able to say the more things change, the better the holistic outcomes for our members. As product providers, we have all of this information and data at our fingertips. So the question that I would have posed to myself last year is, are you willing to actually take the data and human information into account and make your product work for your members? I really hope that the client experience and member focus that we've spoken about today have demonstrated that this is something that we are definitely doing. The one advantage that we have now that we did not have 40 years ago is the availability of data. Not just data on salary levels, contribution rates, or choices at withdrawal, but more personal data that Lorraine referred to in her discussion. The actual human nature of our members. This is the most powerful tool that we have at our disposal if we are going to do anything to improve the outcomes of our members at retirement. The winners over the next 40 years will be those that are able to seamlessly integrate into the existing employee value proposition, or possibly be the entire employee value proposition. The winners will be those that are able to analyze and act on the data, like the Sanlam benchmark, that they have at their fingertips, and never be so arrogant as to think that they know best, but rather continuously look for more data and information to improve their offerings to members. In this way, more and more, the umbrella platform must be built to integrate and accommodate what is necessary to empower members to be confident in all aspects of their lives. So, into the future, we commit to continue to utilize the resources at our disposal to educate and empower members through the multiple engagement platforms that we have. We have been entrusted with the life savings of many, many people, and they count on us as employers, advisors, and product providers to make sure that, as a team, we set them up for success. Therefore, our role is simple. Enable this success as far as possible, working together with all stakeholders. Ultimately, this industry wouldn't exist without our members. And the more that we address the shortcomings that I've touched on earlier, the sooner we can start to improve financial outcomes and confidence for all South Africans. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you will agree with me that those were very thought-provoking insights. It has certainly been a jam-packed morning with a humdinger of nuggets and perspectives. We would certainly love to hear from you, of course, on your comments on the Sanlam benchmark event today, and of course the 2021 survey that we have gone through this morning. Please feel free to leave your comments and observations using the questions box that I referred to earlier. I also encourage you to download the research presentations along with the recording of this event, which will be available on our website. And I'm going to repeat www.sanlambenchmark.co.za. Before we end today, I'd like to pay a final tribute to Derek Smorenberg, the former chairman of the Sanlam Umbrella Fund Board of Trustees, serving from 2007 until his untimely death a few days ago. He retired in February of last year, 2020. He met his untimely death on Saturday, the 19th of June. We thank him for his contribution to our industry, and we offer our heartfelt condolences to his family. He will be sorely missed and deeply mourned by everyone who knew him. For now, from me and the Sanlam Benchmark team, I'd like to thank you for joining us to share once again on this impactful research and insights. It is all our quest to enable people to live with confidence, the kind of confidence that opens doors to new possibilities and a better future, the kind of confidence that achieves the sustainable outcomes for your members to live and to retire with confidence. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.
In life, having confidence is the game changer. The belief that you can rely on someone you can trust. Someone who can provide you with compelling insights developed through rigorous analysis and based on real evidence gathered over the last 40 years. Insights to empower employers, consultants, funds, and members. To open doors to new possibilities and a better future. Confidence comes with knowledge and experience and empowers you to prepare for the ever-changing world and industry. So, wherever you want to be, partner with those who know how to get you there. Someone who is committed to equipping you with the right tools, support, and guidance to help you get from where you are to where you want to be.